I think it's probably going to be one of the closest watched races in Illinois, probably across the country as well, and that's the 13th Congressional District right here, stretching all the way through, traversing the entire state, and that starts in the Metro East St. Louis area, wraps in Springfield, Decatur, and Champaign-Urbana. Something that Republicans criticized was a gerrymandered district, but we don't have an incumbent. It is between Democrat Nikki Budzinski and Republican Regan, and we're going to bring you some of the latest back and forth here with Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. And if you want to chime in about this race, you can always do that live and local, 217-629-7970. You can also email bishoponair@gmail.com, or you can find me on social media. Just search out Bishop on Air, and we can connect that way. So, where this, of course, really stems from is you have a Better Government Association article that came out about the Democrat, Nikki Budzinski's work history, a recent work history. And it detailed how Budzinski worked as a Pritzker campaign advisor, making $322,000, then working in the Pritzker administration when he was elected as a senior aide, and she made $270,000, I think. But that was a double pay of sorts, because half of that was from taxpayers, the other half was from the governor's LLC, which has been criticized as questionably ethical, and the governor's been paying, I think it's like $1.2 million or something. I'll have to take another look at my notes, but he's been paying several senior staffers double, essentially, taxpayer funds, and then also doubling up on that with his own personal finances. So Budzinski was part of that. Then after she left state government, she, within 10 months, worked with a lobbying firm, a group that doesn't disclose donors, and also labor organizations, making $500,000 in 10 months. So Budzinski being criticized by the Republican Regan about that. But then we had an interview Jim Leach conducted on Springfield's Afternoon News here on WMAY, where Jim talked to the Republican about a variety of different issues, including Social Security and whether or not there might be movements to deal with Social Security, the costs of it, making sure that it's sustainable, and so on. So you have a lot of this back and forth that's been going on between Regan and Budzinski, because Budzinski then took that interview with Jim Leach that Deering had, and held a news conference to criticize Deering about the statements that Budzinski claims Deering made. But Deering earlier this week held a news conference to criticize Budzinski about the BGA article. So I want to bring you some of the latest back and forth. Yesterday, we did share some of what Deering had to say and State Representative Avery Bourne had to say. But now I want to get into what Budzinski has to say. And we'll start with her criticizing Deering about the comments she claims that Deering made about Social Security and what's considered means testing. And if you don't know what means testing is, I guess an easy way to say it by using the word is you're testing the means of somebody that's getting Social Security. If they make a lot of money, do they need as much Social Security? If they're making a lot of money in retirement, do they require Social Security as opposed to somebody who is of a lower income bracket that definitely needs that Social Security? So here is Nikki Budzinski talking about Regan Deering's position from yesterday, a news conference she held at the AFL-CIO.
So what I would say, what she said last week on Friday, is that she supports means testing Social Security. For someone that claims to be a political outsider, that's really political speak for cuts. That means cutting Social Security. That's a slippery slope. For seniors that are living on a fixed income, it's opening a Pandora's box for seniors who have so much at stake. Don talked about this. The gains that we have made with Medicare being able to negotiate lower drug prices is something that this Republican leadership, along with Regan Deering, would roll back if they take control. The same with Social Security. If they're open to means testing, that means they're open and will cut Social Security. We need to take that very seriously.
So is that exactly what Regan said? Let's go ahead and listen to what the conversation was like with Jim Leach and Regan Deering on Friday, and we've got this pulled up here from the WMAY Springfield Afternoon News. And again, here is a bit of that conversation with the question asked and Deering's direct response.
One of the strings that's been talked about is related to Social Security and Medicare, doing some things to bring down those costs, maybe raising the eligibility age, maybe means testing benefits. Should there be some further limits or alterations to Social Security and Medicare along those lines?
Well, those two programs are earned benefits, and I think that people that have paid into those really expect the government to try and do everything they can to protect and support those programs, which I'm in favor of. Means testing is something that I have heard conversations about. I think there are those in the upper limits of wealth that might be willing to sacrifice their benefits, knowing that we could have a larger pot of money for those that need it and rely on it and will continue to be on a fixed income. You know, one of the big concerns is for a lot of those seniors is their retirement accounts. I mean, we can talk about preserving Social Security and Medicare, but when we have those that were able to save and, their savings accounts are dropping by about 25%. I mean, I have family members that have talked about being afraid to open up those third quarter reports, and that's not an unusual thing I'm hearing on the trail either.
So again, that's what Regan Deering had to actually say. She didn't say that she is in support of means testing Social Security benefits. So I asked Budzinski yesterday if she's mischaracterizing Deering's position on this. And here's what Budzinski had to say in response to that question.
No, she said she's for means testing. Means testing is, in translation, cuts to Social Security. It opens the door to cutting Social Security for seniors. And I will say, again, what I find so offensive about this isn't a benefit or an entitlement like Republicans like to call this. This is actually something, a retirement fund that people have been paying into their entire life. So even opening up the opportunity of a means test is really political language that means cuts to Social Security.
So we'll hear more of the back and forth. That was just about the Social Security aspect. But what about Budzinski's reaction to criticism over the BGA article? We'll share her reaction to reporters' questions yesterday. So stay tuned. That's on the way here with Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. We've been discussing the back and forth of the 13th Congressional District candidates, Democrat Nikki Budzinski and Republican Regan Deering. Budzinski criticizing Deering for statements she claims Deering made, not necessarily exactly the statements that Deering made, but Deering criticizing Budzinski about a recent Better Government Association investigation of Budzinski's income and her line of work, raising the question of, is she a deep entrenched political insider that will actually have the public's interest at mind, or will she have the insiders in mind representing them? So we'll hear Budzinski respond to some of the criticism, and in particular pointed questions like, are you going to reveal the nature of the consulting work she got paid $500,000 to do, or did she talk to the OEIG about these things? So stay tuned. We'll get to that. But of course, your phone calls 217-629-7970. Good morning.
Morning, Craig. You know, it upsets me because Deering specifically said that there would be people who are of higher means that would be willing to give up their Social Security. This only shows how narrow-minded some other people are, because way back in the 70s and 80s, probably more towards the 70s, when the Republicans were actually in charge of what was going on in Congress, they said, you know what, we're going to have a problem with people who have higher means. What are we going to do? They said, I got an idea. Let's offer to reduce their taxes if they're willing to give up their Social Security.
Yep.
And they did that. So that is a means opportunity. But the thing is that everybody else is looking at something as, well, it's the stick. We're going to take it away from people. We're going to try to beat them with it. We're going to try to misrepresent what other people have, which is a wonderful idea. There are people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett who have said over and over and over again, I don't need all these benefits.
Right.
I wish I could give them back Well, give them an opportunity to give them back, and let's tell them.
And I think that seems to be what Deering was saying ultimately. And again, when I asked if Budzinski was mischaracterizing Deering's statements, she just merely, said, "Hey, if we even open that conversation, it's going to lead to cuts." Hey, I appreciate the call. We do have a couple of more comments we want to get to from the back and forth. So that was all about the means testing of Social Security. What about the reaction to the criticism of the BGA investigation that Republicans took advantage of and criticized Budzinski over? So the question came up to Budzinski as to, well, what's your reaction to the critics who are pointing out of the questions surrounding your prior employment?
First and foremost, I have followed all state and federal ethics laws as it relates to that question. But beyond that, what we are here to talk about, which is she would like to distract us from, is the fact that on Friday, before she held her press conference, she announced that she would make cuts to Social Security. Again,
that's not what she said, but I guess we'll just let that be the previous segment. But I asked specifically some direct questions that really are yes or no questions. One of them being, are you going to reveal and be transparent about the nature of the consulting work that you did to get $500,000 for? And here's Nikki Budzinski's reaction to that question.
So I think the BGA wrote about that, and I commented, which is what I have said previously, which is that I have followed all state and federal ethics laws. I think this is an article that is a clear intention to be distracting from the real issues that working people care about, and that's why she continues to try to give it oxygen. She doesn't want to talk about the things like supporting Social Security, capping the cost of insulin. We made great progress on that issue, allowing for Medicare to cap insulin at $35. It was Republicans that stopped it from being able to be capped for everyone, not just the seniors, but for everyone. We should be looking at those real issues that help people that are struggling right now.
My last question on this one, have you talked to the OEIG about the transfer from the Pritzker administration to...
So that's a part of following all state and federal ethics laws, which I have done. I have followed all state and federal ethics laws.
Let's follow up on Greg's.
Again, asking that direct question of, did you talk to the OEIG about this? Because that would be something that you have to, if you're going to go work for a company that at one point benefited from contracts you were involved in negotiating or working on as part of the governor's office, then, there has to be a review of, is that an ethical transition, the whole idea of a revolving door. So she didn't necessarily directly answer that question, just merely saying that she followed all ethics procedures. So interesting to kind of hear all this back and forth. But one thing I do also want to get to is we asked Congressman Davis yesterday about the control of Congress, even though Davis is not going to be in Congress. And he said it's very important. Republicans, he believes, are going to take Congress. And that gives Republicans some powers within the House, at least, to do certain things. But Budzinski says that it's the Democrats who need to take control of the Congress, and the 13th District could help in that for the Democrats' advantage.
Yeah, it's very important, Greg. The majority runs through the 13th Congressional District. This is a swing district. It's a district that I believe the hardworking men and women of this district are going to help me get elected in November, and that's going to allow us to hopefully keep, and I believe keep, the Democratic majority in the House of Representatives.
So you can hear the crowd there with Budzinski at the AFL-CIO yesterday when she held this news conference, taking questions from reporters. So a lot going on there, but it's important because this is a new congressional district. There's no incumbent, and this is, I think, going to be one of those districts watched by not just the statewide political actors, but by those monitoring things across the country. Some of the other headlines out there, you've got the gubernatorial race still going on. We got less than 2 weeks now before the election. Governor J.B. Pritzker, he's anticipating that it's going to be a pretty solid turnout compared to 2018, he says. Darren Bailey says he's out talking to people on the streets and even to those who don't support him, saying that, let me ask you this, he said in a Facebook video. Are you confident that you can vote for J.B. Pritzker because he's destroyed our schools, he's destroyed our streets, he's raised your taxes and pushing family out of business? Well, no, I can't support that either. So that's the conversation we have to have, Bailey said. But you've also got the lieutenant governors and the candidates for lieutenant governor out on the stump as well. So interesting to see what happens in the next 2 weeks. Meanwhile, you got headlines like this, which I just I don't understand. The Associated Press, conspiracy pushers, a local concern. 16 candidates for local office circulated around the atrium of the Civic Center on a recent night of a logging town near between the Puget Sound in Washington. One by one, they sat at tables of inquisitive voters of what dubbed candidate speed dating. And it goes on to talk about how they're pushing for more poll watchers. And somehow that's considered to be conspiratorial, or somebody who's a conspiracy theorist if they want to make sure that we have what's a common tradition, poll watchers in our elections. So it's interesting to see the corporate media and even the Associated Press framing things that way. People who want to ensure that we have election integrity are somehow conspiracy theorists. All right, so 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks. Are you ready for it? I am ready for it to be over with. So we'll obviously be unpacking even more about the candidates, even more about the issues practically every day up until and even after the election. It is Springfield's Morning News. I'm Greg Bishop on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and